and she's been in Colombo for the past 7 years. She's been covering Sri Lanka's post-war recovery and other developments in politics, the economy, and people-related stories. She studied at Padma Seshadri. She was a student of our own Rama, and she did her BCom and then Asian College of Journalism in Chennai. And then she did her master's in education at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai. In 2015, Meera was chosen as the Elizabeth Neuffer Fellow by the International Women's Media Foundation in the US. She spent about a year at MIT and worked with the Boston Globe and New York Times as part of her course. What Meera has in common with our two Athashrians, Usha, Venkateswaran, and Gita, with whom she's going to be in conversation, is the number of places they have visited, lived in, and the different people they have met during their lifetimes and careers. Meera's focus is on stories of survivors who have braved exploitation and discrimination and have willingly shared their stories with trust and hope that their stories will be heard in a larger canvas. Meera is not just somebody who pecks at the keys of her laptop or talks to people. She's a wonderful singer, trained with Sri Lalgudi Jayaraman, the doyen of Carnatic music, the violin maestro. And she says that he has been a major influence in her life. Now, I'll just quickly introduce two of our stars, Athashri stars. One is Usha Venkateswaran. And both these ladies have pitched their tents in many places all over the world after following their diplomat husbands. Gita has lived in Lebanon, China, Belgium, Bangladesh, Poland, and Pakistan. And she spent nearly 2 decades in Hong Kong, where she taught English literature, and history to high school students. She has, there are 2 other aspects of her personality. One is that she has been very active in theatre. She has directed many English plays and Tamil plays in Hong Kong with her students and with her friends. And she has adapted English plays into Tamil and staged them. She has, in recent years, been working as a translator and has 7 published English translations of Tamil books. She works with the Sahitya Academy. She's one of the brightest stars in our own firmament. And my own dear darling, Usha Venkateswaran. She is something else. She's, I mean, you just can't put her into a few words and say, this is Usha Venkateswaran, but I'll try. She has an MSc in Institution Management and Dietetics from Chennai. She has years of teaching experience. She was a fellow in MIT in International Nutritional Planning. She learned Bharatanatyam under the iconoclastic doyen, Guru Vadubur Ramaya Pillai. So everything she does is an adavu or a mudra or, you know, that kind of thing. She trained in choreography in Moscow. In fact, you should listen to her talk about her experience in Moscow. It's amazing. And has promoted Indian dance in the 9 countries that she has lived. As director of Natya Lakshana, she has produced many dance dramas that were presented at many international and national dance festivals. She is the author of a monograph on La Murky. One more thing about Gita, which I missed in between. Gita has won the Nalli Dishai Ettum Award for the best translation of the year from Tamil into English. She has also done the translation of Ummat. That is where the link to Meera comes. Is a translation of a work written by Sharmila Sayyid, a Sri Lankan. And the book is set in Sri Lanka. It is an account that spans the 3 decades of the Sri Lankan Civil War, highlighting the plight of women across communal and ethnic divides. And Meera, what connects me to you is I acted in Kannathil Muttamital. So just to tell you that we're all connected. And our dear Sir Raja was the first one to start a journalism course in the Bombay University. So, you know, we're all kind of touch, knitted together in so many ways. We really look forward to hearing you speak. And thank you for coming. And the stage is yours.
Welcome, Meera. And thank you, Usha and Gita, for accepting to be in this conversation. So over to you, Meera, now. Thank you.
So thank you so much to all of you for having me join this discussion. You said it's a young and bright face, but I think the collective experience of all the people in this window that I see and the wisdom, I'm sure there's so much to learn from each of you. So it's really a pleasure and my honor to be in conversation with you all. And of particular, what's really special is that this is also organized by one of my favorite teachers from school, Rama Narayan Swami ma'am. And it's also lovely to see Hemlata ma'am and Ambika ma'am join. So I can't see many other names in the same window. Perhaps there are, but that's the really special part of being in this discussion. And Hemlata ma'am taught history and Ambika ma'am taught geography. And in a way, the work I do, I think there's a little bit of all of that. And it's lovely to join you all. And as it was said, I've been now in Sri Lanka for about 7 years in all, cumulatively. And I must say it's been an incredible learning curve and really enriching journey. And I'm very fortunate to have been given this assignment. And I look forward to answering your questions. I've always had the easy job of asking questions. And today I'm on the other side and you all get to ask questions. And now I know what it's like to have to answer them. And I just saw Chitra ma'am too. It's lovely to see so many of my teachers here. So please, I'm here and I'll try my best to respond to the thoughts and questions you may have. Yeah.
One small request to all of you, please mute yourself. I see that many of the people who've joined in recently have not muted themselves. If possible, the video also, because your movement is distracting. Thank you so much. Yeah, over to Usha. Are you starting off?
Yeah, I can start off.
Yeah.
Well, you already said about the young and the active correspondent. It is true. Wherever I have been, I have met correspondents and representatives of various newspapers, all pretty on the oldish side. Not only that, but rather boring and terribly unaware of the presence of women. So I'm delighted that you are there and you're a woman and you're the single person to represent as an international journalist. So that's a big step forward from what I have experienced. I hope, I do know that in India, we have a lot of journalists and people who interview, and they're terribly smart. So I'm very happy about that too. So I would like to just start off with this. It's about the social atmosphere, because I believe there are three different kind of groups which have to interact and live together. That is the Tamils, the Sri Lankans, and the Muslims. And sometimes they are called Islamists. So I would like some input into that.
Sure. So Sri Lanka, as we know, on the map is a tiny teardrop-shaped island, which is so close to us, so close to the east coast of India, where I'm from Chennai. So it's geographically really close, and it's about a 50-minute flight from Chennai, really. It's less than an hour. You just hop. The journey to the airport is often longer to the actual travel time to Colombo. That's how close we are. And in a way, as a people, Sri Lankans are also very similar to us in numerable ways. To start with, they look like us, they sound like us, they eat like us, they cook like us. Many cultural similarities too, but they're also very distinct as a people. They have their own identities and special cultural traits and attributes. So it's an island of 22 million people. And as Usha ma'am said, there are three ethnic groups here: the Sinhalese, who make up the majority population of the island. They are mostly Buddhists. So Sinhalese is the majority ethnicity, and you have two minority communities, the Tamils and the Tamils and the Muslims. So the Muslims are also Tamil speaking, but they identify as a separate ethnic group. So the Tamils constitute about 15% of the island's population, and the Muslims about 10%. So they are geographically spread, though most of the Tamils live in the north and the east of the island, which is traditionally considered the homeland of Tamils of Sri Lanka. But we also have a more recent Tamil community that is settled in the central highlands, the hill country, where Sri Lanka's famed tea estates are located. So those Tamils were brought in during the time of the British rule as laborers from South India to work in the estates, in the plantations, and they have since made Sri Lanka their home. So you have even within Tamils these different categories. They came just less than 2 centuries ago, the ones living in the central highlands, and those living in the north and east have a longer history in this island. And the Muslims, of course, came from different parts of the world, including India, and have settled here, but usually are Tamil speaking, but have most of them have acquired also the Sinhala language. So they are bilingual or trilingual, speaking English as well. So it's a small country with 22 million people, but very diverse within that country in terms of language, culture, religion. And that also explains the history, the complex history that this island has witnessed and still continues to witness. So this is broadly the landscape of Sri Lanka and its people.
Is there any standoff feeling with India now, or which is politically influenced amongst the Sri Lankans?
Sure. I think as many of you might be familiar, India has a long association with Sri Lanka from the years of war and even before that, and also trying to broker peace at different stages in Sri Lanka's history. So one of the significant outcomes of Indian engagement in Sri Lanka has been what's called the Indo-Lanka Peace Accord of 1987. So that is still a very important historic development in Indo-Lanka relations, because it birthed this very important constitutional amendment in Sri Lanka, which assured a measure of power, a measure of devolution to the provinces. Like in India, we have a federal arrangement where states have considerable power to govern themselves. But in Sri Lanka, it's a largely centralized system of administration. And what this amendment, called the 13th Amendment to their constitution, did after Indian intervention is that it assured a measure of devolution to the provinces, which meant that the Tamil people could also get some amount of power to govern their own provinces. So that has been the history of Indian involvement. Of course, after the war, Indian engagement has, I would say, seen a shift, because until the war ended, I think India took different positions. We know that India was involved in arming the rebel groups at one point, including the LTTE. Many of the rebel groups were trained in India. And later, India was also very keen that the war be stopped, because they considered the LTTE a very dreadful terrorist group, especially after they assassinated our Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. India's stance began shifting, and they were keen to have the war, they were keen to see the war end. And at that time, they supported the regime in Colombo, and the war came to an end. But after the war ended, while India has time and again emphasized the need to devolve more powers to Tamils and ensure that their rights and aspirations are met, I think India's preoccupation now is really China's growing presence and role in Sri Lanka. I think the Tamil question has taken a bit of a backseat in India's own priorities, and China has really become the preoccupation. And China, not only in Sri Lanka, as we know, China has increased its engagement with all our neighbors, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Maldives. So in that continuation, I think India is very preoccupied with China's physical presence here, strategic presence here, and the influence it has in the island. So I think that is the shift now. And India is seen differently by different groups within Sri Lanka. So the Sinhalese largely see India as having been interventionist, that they came first, equip the Tamil rebels. Then they are telling us to implement our constitution in a particular way. They're telling us what to do. So India is seen as I'm generalizing, there are people who have a more nuanced reading, but in general, I think India is seen as a big brother, a bully next door that would come and tell Sri Lanka what to do. The Tamils, see India differently. Many Tamils think India still has a role, is still one of the most valuable arbiters in the region and the world. And if anybody can ensure that Tamils' rights and aspirations are fulfilled, it's only India that can put that sort of weight, is what many Tamils feel. And it's in that spirit that they continue engaging with India, with the hope that India can pressure Sri Lanka to deliver on that front. So depending on who you are within Sri Lanka, I think the image of India might vary a little.
I'd like to.
Chinese, could you just tell how the presence is felt by the people?
It's very interesting that you ask that now, because as we speak, for the first time, Sri Lankans, about 20 different groups, political groups and civil society groups, have petitioned the Supreme Court against a particular law that the government has drafted, a bill, it is yet to become law, to govern what is called the Colombo Port City, which is built built with Chinese funding, totaling $1.4 billion. So this Chinese built port city is going to have exclusive laws to govern that area. And for the first time, we are hearing a lot of resistance within Sri Lanka to this kind of growing Chinese presence. They feel that China might have more control over this port city than Sri Lanka itself. And that fear is currently playing out as we speak.
Oh, good. Oh, well.
Good.
Now let Gita speak, please.
No. I would like, I was in Sri Lanka 2 years ago. And at that time, when we traveled around, I noticed that the Tamil areas were really starkly backward in comparison with the rest of Sri Lanka. I mean, that is the feeling I got. I may be wrong. I mean, after all, I was there only for I was traveling around for about a week. So that may not be the right impression. Maybe I got it because I had some prejudices, but that's what I get. What do you think? I mean, are they less developed, less infrastructure, less stuff like that? I mean, is it like that, the Tamil speaking areas? We went to Jaffna and some places around it.
Right. So in terms of Sri Lanka's post-independence development, now Sri Lanka became independent just a few months after us. They say that, there was no proactive independence struggle here. It was almost like an afterthought that Sri Lanka was given independence. So in a way, post-independent Sri Lanka has seen politically this competing nationalisms. On the one side, the Sinhala Buddhist nationalism, and on the other, the assertion of Tamil nationalism as a counter to that. So in this development, I think Sri Lanka did particularly well in fields like public health, public education. They have universal public education up to university level and universal public health care. Now, increasingly, there have been, there's been a push to privatize, and there are sections that are resisting it, because in South Asia, in our region, Sri Lanka has one of the best public health systems and one of the best public education systems as well, that is for free for everybody. Now, in terms of development, which you talked about, so at one point, I mean, geographically, before going into the development, maybe I should tell you visually how the landscape is. So much of southern Sri Lanka would be very, very similar to Kerala for those of you who've been there and not here. In terms of the greenery, the visual landscape, even how people dress and look, and the cuisine, which is very coconut and fish heavy. So this, the southern part of Sri Lanka is very starkly similar to Kerala. And then the north and the east would be somewhat more similar in landscape and terrain to Tamil Nadu, right? Especially, I was very surprised once when I went to Rameshwaram and Dhanushkodi, for example, which was very similar in ways to Jaffna and Mullatthivu and those areas, in terms of the trees, the vegetation, the landscape. So in terms of development, I mean, at one point before the war, the north and east were flourishing in terms of agriculture. They grew paddy in massive quantities, and palmyra is a very rich resource in those areas. So it was good, and education was very advanced. The Jaffna Tamils, in fact, have a historic legacy of making it big in education, in civil services. And in fact, that's even said to be one of the triggers for the ethnic conflict, that Tamils were seen as being very successful at one point, very enterprising, very industrious. So the North and East has seen that sort of development, but of course, after the war, it was bulldozed. It's complete destruction, right? I mean, houses, tens of thousands of houses have gone. Factories and industries have been bulldozed. So roads are still being laid. People are still trying to build their homes. So in that, the area has been set back by about 30, 40 years. And what you saw there was really a reflection of that. And that is why poverty levels are also very high. One, because of the extent of destruction during the war, and two, the lack of thoughtful development after the war ended. The development after the war has been rather slow. But this is not to say there is no poverty in other parts of the country. For example, the hill country that I spoke about, the areas where the tea estates are located, some of Sri Lanka's most impoverished communities. The hill country Tamils, or Indian origin Tamils as they are called, live still in line rooms that were, this colonial era matchbox-like tenements, where 8 to 10 people live in just one room, and it's quite, the deprivation there is quite stark as well, as is in some parts of, Sinhalese inhabited provinces as well. There are very backward areas there too. But it's true that the war-affected areas have suffered a particular setback, and especially are, facing the lack of development, and are facing acute poverty and joblessness. So it's true that the war-affected areas have peculiar challenges, although there are poverty-stricken areas in other parts of the country as well.
So you wanted to ask about the Gita?
Yeah, I want to ask one more question about, I wanted to ask about, the ethnic relations. Have they improved after the Civil War, after the end of the Civil War? Because they were very bitter, right, at the end of the Civil War. Have they improved? Because the Sinhalese seem to be, Sinhalese and the Tamils there, they all seem to be happy people. I mean, they want to get out of it, I thought. That's what I felt. And I wondered whether that was true and whether they were getting out of it somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I may not have a straightforward answer to that question, though it's one of the most important questions. I'll try my best to address that. Now, in all sections within Sri Lanka, there are people who desperately want to put the war behind, put the conflict behind, and move forward. But as many of my Sri Lankan friends would say, the war is over, but the conflict is not. So the root causes for the conflict, which is that one community felt less equal than the other, still remains. And that is really the tragedy and the challenge that faces this country, which is that after fighting a war that spanned over 3 decades, the core issues that drove the war haven't fundamentally changed. I don't think Tamils feel any more equal today than they did before the war. I don't think Muslims feel any more secure today. So in a sense, Sri Lanka is facing, the reality is that the communities are polarized. And even today, the nationalisms are competing with each other. And politicians on all sides seek to make gains out of these sentiments rather than address people's core insecurities and problems. So in a way, a reconciliation has not happened. And I can tell you something that this Tamil parliamentarian, a woman from Mullatthivu, her name is Shanti Sri Skandaraja. She's a former parliamentarian representing the district. And she once told me that in Sri Lanka, somehow NGOs and some foreign institutions thought they can put 5 Sinhalese, 5 Tamils, and 5 Muslims in a room, give us all snacks and cake to eat, and say, okay, y'all are together, and reconciliation happens. But that's unfortunately that's not how reconciliation happens, because there's a pending justice question. Now, Tamils want accountability for what they call war crimes committed during the war, and many of the atrocities that they say were committed soon after. And they want justice. They want also a political solution, which would ensure them greater power to self-govern, to self-determine their own futures. So those questions still are intact. We are not any more closer to resolving them. In fact, many would argue it has got even more complicated now because of the nature of the regime here, and a deeply polarized vote in the last elections. So communities are in a tense sort of dynamic.
Okay. Usha, why don't you?
Yeah. Talking about culture, have the Tamils been able to keep up their culture?
Yes and no. As we know, thousands of Tamil families had to flee the country during the war. They, migrated either to Europe or North America, to Australia, to different parts. And as of today, we have about 1 lakh Sri Lankan refugees living in India, mostly Tamil Nadu. So with so many tens of thousands of people gone, they're already a small population compared to their actual strength. But in a way, they do try to keep their cultures alive. And, there's a lot of interest in, for example, Bharatanatyam in the north. And they have a lot of music, classical and folk traditions. And their food, their cuisine is pretty different to Tamil Nadu cuisine. Interestingly, even the Tamil cuisine here is closer to Kerala's. For example, they have, idiyappam, puttu, and appam, which is all more common in Kerala than Tamil Nadu, right? So, and I was recently told, and I found this fascinating, the temple architecture in the north and east where Tamils live, I believe is closer to the Kerala temple architecture rather than the Tamil Nadu one. So I think already they've drawn upon different cultures, and, they have their own traditions, and they try to keep them alive. But Kollywood, Tamil cinema from India has a huge impact. And there are many who are not particularly thrilled about that because of, some of the, some effect that it has. But there is a large following, and they love Tamil cinema from South India. So culturally speaking, the hill country Tamils too have their own drumming traditions, their own theater, music. But I would say the Tamil culture is largely tethered to what happens in Tamil Nadu, while the Sinhalese culture is a little different. And they have their own music and dance and, Kandyan dance tradition. In fact, it might be of interest to you all, since we're speaking of culture, that Nityagram, which is near Bangalore,
Yes.
They have been regularly collaborating with Chitrasena Dance School in Colombo, which is a Kandyan dance school. So they have this lovely friendship and collaboration. They've done productions together, because Kandyan dance form is this very masculine, earthy, and sort of very majestic dance form, and it complemented beautifully with the very sensual Odissi. So they've struck this amazing, collaboration and friendship. And so we see a lot of these exchanges also happening.
Wow.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Upeka,
Yes.
the one who was running the institute.
Yes.
Doing that?
Yes.
Oh.
Upeka is one of the senior gurus there, and happens to be one of my dear friends. So she'll be thrilled if I tell her that.
Give my regards to her.
Yeah.
And she was here, and I met her also in Kandyan.
Okay.
So,
and it's amazing. I mean, you brought up Upeka, her father Chitrasena, who's really the pioneer of this Kandyan dance tradition on the stage here. I mean, he himself drew so much inspiration from Indian art. He traveled to Shantiniketan, he traveled to Kerala and to Kalamandalam. So the kind of cultural exchanges there have been, even between the Sinhalese and different cultures in India. I don't think within India we know enough about that. While the link between the Tamils of both countries is maybe more pronounced, the Sinhalese too have deep cultural connections with different parts of India. And in fact, Sinhala itself is based on Pali. And there are a lot of Sanskrit words. I learn Sinhala now, not very good at it, but slowly learning. There are so many Sanskrit words, and there is, there's so many similarities to Oriya, to Bengali. So it's actually quite fascinating, the kind of cultural connections. And of course, Buddha is an icon. I mean, he's the foremost deity for Sinhalese in Sri Lanka, and therefore they have a lot of love for Bodh Gaya and all the Buddha trails in India. So yes, in fact, as Hemlata ma'am is pointing out, so many Sri Lankan students regularly study in Indian university, in Indian schools during the war now, and they have some lovely connections and friends there. And often I've found that I've met so many Sri Lankans who know more about India sometimes than I do, or have traveled more widely than I have in India. Because sometimes in India, we are confined to our states or those little bubbles, and it's hard to have covered a lot. But it's always lovely to hear them, invoke different states, languages, cuisines in India, and speak very fondly of it. And the other fascinating thing I saw is that Bollywood has a big fan base among the Sinhalese of Sri Lanka. So a lot of old Hindi songs, say Mohammad Rafi and Kishore Kumar songs, have a Sinhala counterpart. Like they would have taken old Hindi songs, put Sinhala lyrics, and they have it in their own culture, which is also really beautiful.
Well, that's wonderful. These are actually, culture is the, I would say, a binding factor amongst human beings. So I think if one extends one hand in culture, there's a softening in, I would say, relationship. So that's why we always like to export and import.
I have a question. What about gender equality? How is that in Sri Lanka? Is it better than in India? Is there more, are the sexes more equal? Are they paid equal salaries and, that sort of thing? Is it better there? And what about a girl child? Is a girl child welcomed when it comes into either a Tamil, I don't think so. But anyway, I don't know much about the others, where Sri Lankans and the Sinhalese, Sri Lanka, Sinhalese, and I don't think Muslims welcome girls as well. So anyway, what do you think? This is the impression I got from that translation. That
sure. I think increasingly there's a shift in terms of welcoming the girl child, I think, because a lot of girls from Tamil, Muslim and Sinhalese communities are going to university, are doing very well for themselves. So I think in terms of welcoming the girl child, there's perhaps a shift, I would say, from maybe a decade or two ago. And in terms of equality, I think it's largely comparable to India. There are, examples of women being accorded positions, and Sri Lanka famously had one of the earliest woman prime ministers, Sirimava Bandaranaike. But, one of Sri Lanka's foremost historians, Kumari Jayawardena, once wrote a piece about how calling it widow's might, saying these women who occupy these powerful positions, are they able to assert themselves as women, or are they having to fit their roles into a very patriarchal system, is a question she asked. So in that, I think it's very, it's quite comparable to the situation in India. And, but there are some matrilineal communities within the Sinhalese community and Tamil community as well, in terms of inheriting land, which we see in Sri Lanka also, in Kerala also, right? Some of those traditions are there. And some personal laws, the Sinhalese, the Kandyan law, there's a Desa Valamai law for the Tamils, and Muslims are working on their own personal law, have tried to give more land rights to women, for example. So there are, instances of where the women are given some prominence and importance. But in general, I would think that, gender equality would be comparable to what we see in India. You have, these modern sections also, and you have conventional challenges and roles that women do. So it's I wouldn't say that Sri Lanka is any more progressive on gender than India is.
Oh, that's a bit sad to hear. Is it because of the Tamil influence?
Not really. I think maybe this is also a South Asian thing. I don't know. That patriarchy seems fairly well entrenched as it is everywhere else. But as I said, there have been important women's movements. And here the labor force that Sri Lanka really counts on, whether it's tea, garment export, or remittances of laborers working in mostly West Asian countries, a majority of this workforce is women. Tea pluckers are largely women. Garment manufacturers, the garment workers are largely women, and the labor force in West Asian countries are largely women. But I don't know that whether that has emancipated them or given them the pride of place. I would say no. They are still discriminated against in terms of wages, in terms of positions, in terms of in political representation. Everything, the fight is still going on.
Just like in India, it's conditions. But I think you were talking about food. So as seniors, especially in a lockdown, the only thing we can do is to talk to people like on the, can you hear me? My thing went off.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, so the only thing that we can do is to perhaps talk to people online and enjoy movies and think of food. So we'd love to hear more about the food part of it. So what are the favorites that you would think would be something which we can also try out here?
Definitely. So I'm firstly, when I moved here, a lot of people said that, for a vegetarian, it might not be very easy to find a variety. But my experience has been not just in Colombo, but in other parts as well, that because of their general very hospitable tendency, somehow they'll dish out something vegetarian. And what's amazing about Sri Lankan cuisine is it's a very balanced, protein rich and vegetable rich diet that they have every day. So their main meal, they are mainly rice eaters like us, like South Indians. They grow rice, both red rice and white rice, and their main meal is called rice and curry. So they serve a portion of rice in the center of the plate and surround it with about 4 or 5 vegetables, one dal, and fish or meat, most likely fish because seafood is their mainstay here. And they often have lovely greens like they call it, I know the Tamil name, we call it vallarai. I don't know what it's called in English. The leaf, they make salads with these different leaves, and it's amazing. They have a very, very flavorful, very healthy cuisine. And of course, their lighter items are like, string hoppers, idiyappam, hoppers, appam, puttu, kottu, and so on. So in terms of Sinhalese cuisine and Jaffna cuisine, I was telling you it's quite coconut heavy, coconut milk, coconut. And then, it's a lot like Kerala food as well in terms of flavor. It's very flavorful. And in terms of favorite recipes, what's really easy for me, and I think I'll share that, is they make an amazing bitter gourd salad. So they chop the bitter gourd into thin, fine circles, and then either deep or shallow fry it nicely. And then when it's dry and the oil is all drained out, add some chopped onions, tomatoes, chilies, mix it and add squeeze a little bit of lime on top with salt. And I can tell you it's one of the really tastiest things we can make at home, and it's quite easy. And sambal and sodi, yes. One of your colleagues is telling me they make different sambals, which is like dry chutney. They make it with coconut, onion, and chili. They make it with tomato, onion. So that it's like a staple side dish with many things that they have. And sodi is like they call it hodi. Sodi, it's a type of a stew with coconut milk, mildly flavored and very tasty. And these are like popular accompaniments to their starch. And they also have a very thriving baking tradition. So breads and buns and cakes are really big here. and people are always baking at home, and this lockdown just saw an overdose of that. I mean, everybody was baking, and of course I was the beneficiary of it. I won't complain, but yeah. So they love their food, they love their dessert, even if it's a very humble, modest home that you're visiting. If there's a meal, there's always a dessert, a bowl of fruits, ice cream, or that sort of. The meal is never complete without dessert. So everybody has a sweet tooth, and everybody loves tea. They mostly drink black tea with a piece of jaggery, which is really tasty. So they don't add sugar to the tea or milk, and they just have a cup of black tea with jaggery, which I've also got used to now. So yeah, they love their food, they love their drinks, and their favorite drink, of course, is arak, which comes either from coconut or palmyra. That's their drink, and they make beer and arak here and export that. So they love their food, they love their drinks, and they really like to be jolly.
And they like to dance.
Yeah.
So you're going to sing us a dialogue.
Okay. It's not my place to actually give you anecdotes, but I can't resist this. About 50 something years ago, in the early 60s, I met a Sri Lankan when we were posted to Beijing, and she asked me, "What is your cooking medium?" I said, "We cook in whatever oil I was using at that time. That's what I was, that's what you call cooking medium, right? In India, what do you call a cooking medium?" And then she said, "No. Then I said, "What is your cooking medium?" She said, "Our cooking medium is coconut milk, and we don't get it here. So I'm using ordinary cow's milk." So what do you understand? That is what, that stuck in my memory, because I thought, my God, and her name was Delicia. That I remember very well.
Okay.
All those years. And they have really interesting names there, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Usha, you want to say something? You want to ask the lady? Where's Usha anyway?
I think we've lost Usha. Maybe she'll come back.
Okay.
Yeah. So Gita, maybe you can continue if you want to say something else. I'll just check on Usha.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to ask you, in your personal view, which country was easiest to work in? India, Sri Lanka. You also worked in the US. So as far as getting interviews with famous people, as far as all the things that you need to do when you're a journalist, anyway. So I just leave it to you.
I think I enjoyed all three, and I enjoy, Sri Lanka also for different reasons. So, and somebody in the chat window also asked me about women's safety. So, coming from India and living in Colombo, I would think that Colombo is, I feel more safe in Colombo than I have in any other.
Oh gosh, that's what I'm wondering. Why? Sorry.
It's very, very safe. Not to say that there aren't incidents, there isn't, harassment in public transport. Things that we experience in India also happen here. But I'm just comparing to India, and, I've not lived in too many Indian cities. I've lived only in Chennai and Mumbai. And Mumbai is pretty safe, and Chennai is also relatively safe. But I think Colombo is particularly safe. And in general, I have really, to answer your question, I think different countries have different, contexts and challenges. But I can tell you what I find really exciting about working here in terms of interviews. So one thing is when you're a media person coming from India, and the Hindu has had a presence in Sri Lanka from 1987, I think. So they are very welcoming of Indian media, and access is pretty good because they would like their views to be heard in India. And some of them are, particularly interested in sort of putting out their perspective in India, because, they would like their experiences to go out in their own voices rather than be represented by, somebody. So in that, Indian media has good access here. But once we're able to speak the languages, I think being a Tamil speaker has been an advantage. So when we travel to the Northeast, people are willing to talk. distance of Tamil Nadu, they always have time for you, and with a lot of trust, with a lot of hope, they share their stories, however adverse or bitter those stories are. So in that, I'm very grateful, and I've been very lucky in terms of meeting people, and I've very rarely been told that, I don't want to talk to you, or what's the point, or that sort of thing. So people have been very welcoming. So in India also, it was pretty much the same, I would think. I mean, occasionally people would be angry with something that came in your paper and say, we don't want to talk to your paper. That, one-off instances could happen, but largely people are quite willing to speak. What would be different to the US and our region is, in our region, we can still go to somebody's house, knock on their door in a village and say, hey, I'm a journalist from this place, can I please talk to you? And they would be extremely welcoming. I'm not sure we can do that in America with the same confidence. I'm sure there are people who will still talk to you, but not maybe as many who would just call you into their homes, feed you, give you tea, and tell you their story. And, that sort of thing may not happen there. But, and I've not worked there long enough to know what it's like outside the big cities. And I don't know enough about that. Yeah.
How about security for you? Are you sure of security? I mean, is there any danger which may be there or not?
Well, in terms of security, I think to start with, English language journalists are, by virtue of writing in English, a little more visible than our Tamil or Sinhala counterparts, who sometimes when they face harassment, the stories don't even come out. So in English is already one layer of immunity. And then being a foreign correspondent, I think people tend to be cautious because, when there is an incident, then it gets disproportionate coverage also, that so-and-so Indian correspondent here had to face this sort of thing. But this is not to say that there haven't been challenges or threats in some ways, but usually, like, just being professional and just trying to do our job and covering all bases and trying to be rigorous in the work has so far been some sort of safety, that if you've already asked the government for their version, if you've already verified your facts and are sure. And I'm also grateful that every time I've faced that kind of a challenge here, where the government or some powerful people may not appreciate your story or your analysis and would give that kind of feedback and sometimes veiled threats, I think the paper has always stood by my work and has always sort of backed what I've written, which also is very important. So the kind of institutional backing also gives us a lot of safety. But otherwise, in terms of physical safety, I have not faced any threat. Occasional following happens, but I think that's part of the job, and general discretion, and that's what is used. Yeah.
Do you have a family there or you're alone?
I live by myself.
Okay, so that must be enough to keep you occupied there.
Yes, and I've been very, very lucky with friends. So including Upeka, who you mentioned. So I have absolutely lovely friends, and in Sri Lanka, there's still this old school thing of actually physically calling on people. If a friend hears you're not well, you're down with the flu or fever, they'll come home with a flask of soup or something.
Right. Yes.
So that sort of that very community thing is still there. So in a way, I've been very lucky with my friends. They are professionally also extremely helpful because I need a lot of insight from people who are from here. I mean, I'm somebody who's come here and trying to figure out. So I always value all their perspectives, and even outside of that, they are my huge support system here.
How about the corona? What's happening?
Corona, I mean, compared to India, it would seem okay, but we are also experiencing a surge here. So early last year, Sri Lanka did, really well in terms of containing the spread. We had a nearly 3-month complete curfew, where even if you step out, you would get arrested. That sort of stringent curfew. So Sri Lanka made like international headlines for containing the virus very effectively, but second and third wave, they couldn't do the same. So we are experiencing a spike here and will likely have a lockdown soon.
Oh, that's really bad. Because of traffic, maybe there are too many tourists coming.
Actually, they opened up the borders only in January, but some clusters that emerged in the country, they didn't contain soon enough. And once, I think things were getting, got a bit complacent. And the other thing that happened was, I was telling you, the public health system here is really efficient and well-oiled,
Right.
reaches all parts of rural Sri Lanka. In fact, Sri Lanka is one of the few countries in the region to eradicate malaria. They've done so well with public health on some fronts, but the army is also actively involved in this corona management, which has raised concern, among different sections here, because when somebody with a gun comes and tells you to get inside your house in order to, combat corona, it gives a different message. So some people are worried about that as well.
Okay, thanks a lot. No, we must let others also.
Could we open up after she has given us her song?
Yes,
she promised us a song.
Sure.
So
I think
Meera,
that will be the finale, but yes, let's hear the song first.
Yeah.
You want the song? Okay.
Yes,
actually, there are some questions in the chat. Should we then come back to those after the song?
Yes.
Come back to the questions after the song, because the questions can go on for some time and I don't want to miss hearing your voice. Okay, all right.
Right, okay.
Okay.
துன்பம் நேர்கையில் யாழெடுத்து நீ இன்பம் சேர்க்க மாட்டாயா, எமக்கின்பம் சேர்க்க மாட்டாயா, துன்பம் நேர்கையில் யாழெடுத்து நீ இன்பம் சேர்க்க மாட்டாயா, அன்பிலா நெஞ்சில் தமிழில் பாடி நீ, அன்பிலா நெஞ்சில் தமிழில் பாடி நீ அல்லல் நீக்க மாட்டாயா, கண்ணே அல்லல் நீக்க மாட்டாயா, துன்பம் நேர்கையில் யாழெடுத்து நீ இன்பம் சேர்க்க மாட்டாயா, வன்பும் எளிமையும் சூழும் நாட்டிலே, வன்பும் எளிமையும் சூழும் நாட்டிலே வாழ்வின் உணர்வு சேர்க்க, எம் வாழ்வின் உணர்வு சேர்க்க நீ அன்றை நற்றமிழ் கூத்தின் முறையினால் ஆடி காட்ட மாட்டாயா, கண்ணே ஆடி காட்ட மாட்டாயா, துன்பம் நேர்கையில் யாழெடுத்து நீ இன்பம் சேர்க்க மாட்டாயா, அறமிதென்றும் யாம் மறமிதென்றுமே அருகிலாத போது, அருகிலாத போது தமிழ் இறைவனாரின் திருக்குறளிலே ஒரு சொல், இறைவனாரின் திருக்குறளிலே ஒரு சொல் இயம்பி காட்ட மாட்டாயா, நீ அம்பி காட்ட மாட்டாயா அன்றை நற்றமிழ் கூத்தின் முறையினால் ஆடி காட்ட மாட்டாயா கண்ணே ஆடி காட்ட மாட்டாயா துன்பம் நேர்கையில் யாழெடுத்து நீ இன்பம் சேர்க்க மாட்டாயா எமக்கின்பம் சேர்க்க மாட்டாயா அன்பிலா நெஞ்சில் தமிழ் பாடி நீ அல்லல் நீக்க மாட்டாயா கண்ணே அல்லல் நீக்க மாட்டாயா துன்பம் நேர்கையில் யாழெடுத்து நீ இன்பம் சேர்க்க மாட்டாயா
Oh, thank you, Meera. That was
Wow.
wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Lovely.
But you should
Really
sing
beautiful.
Baila.
The messages.
Give us the atmosphere.
Baila.
Yeah, we are going to invite you for our fine arts circle, and you have to give us a performance.
My music
Then,
is, as you can see, quite rusty.
no, it was lovely. What we want, what you could do is read out the question and
Okay.
answer instead of asking each one to unmute, and because there are quite a few questions already. So could you
Okay.
maybe ask each one? I mean, like read out the question and give out the answer, and
Sure.
then maybe after that we can ask people to unmute and ask.
Right.
Okay, if there's time for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Hemalata ma'am says, I have a keen interest in Sri Lanka, having lived there many decades ago. Post LTT, the government's attitude towards Tamils and the human rights violations, unmindful of international censure and the present government's apathy. After a point, any country would be more engaged in their own affairs. Unfortunately, our neighbors look at us as bullies. China's presence is ominous, and that they may not be far when she would control Sri Lankan affairs. Very true. That's, I think, a valuable summary of the state of affairs here. And there's a question from Dr. Shanta. She says her late husband spent his childhood in Jaffna. He used to tell me that long back Tamils were treated one step lower. Is that true? Yes, indeed. And I think that is one of the primary reasons for the conflict, the ethnic conflict, that Tamils felt they were treated as second-class citizens. And that is what complicated Sri Lanka's post-war trajectory. And till date, they are suffering the consequences of that. Then Hemlata ma'am says Jaffna University and library, one of the best in South Asia, and Tamils unfortunately were considered as others. And yes, Jaffna University, you may also recall, the library was burnt by Sinhalese mobs, and that is one of the most violent acts that the Tamils had to witness. And the burnt library still bears testimony to the violence and the discrimination that the community suffered. Chitra ma'am says she had been to Hatton for teacher training twice and could see that they were disadvantaged. True, Hatton is located in the hill country, as I told you, the central highlands where the tea estates are. And it's very hard to reconcile the visual, the imagery, which is stunning and beautiful, and the lived realities of people who work in these places. So it's always pretty hard, and lovely to know that you have been to one of the most beautiful parts of the country. Himlata ma'am asks for suggestions in terms of a good book on the Sri Lankan crisis. So there have been very many books written on Sri Lanka, including by Indians, but I would suggest one written by my friend and a fellow Bangalorean for y'all, called Rohini Mohan. She's also a journalist. She's my classmate. She wrote a book called Seasons of Trouble, which was published by Verso. And later I could also send the references to these books to Rama ma'am for circulation if you all are interested. That's a very thoughtful book that tells the story of Sri Lanka through human experience. So that is a book that many people have liked very much. And the other I would suggest, I'm not sure it's available still. It's written by a Sri Lankan Tamil who lived in London for the longest time called Sivanandan. He wrote this book called When Memory Dies, which is a really powerful account. Sivanandan was engaged in anti-racist activism in London, and he was a Marxist, and he wrote about Sri Lankan society and also quite critical of some things that happened within Tamil society. There's enough reason to reflect on the Tamils' own history as well. On the one hand, they suffered in the hands of Sinhalese state, but within the Tamil community, there is still a lot of discrimination, and the dynamic between the Tamils and the Muslims of Sri Lanka and how Tamils treat Muslims. It's quite complex, and so many layers to be looked into. Padmini ma'am asks if I'm able to use my music. Well, as I said, I don't professionally practice music anymore, so it's still just for the love of it that I sing. I don't practice rigorously or regularly, but I have a bunch of friends who are very, very fond of music. So whenever we get together, there's always some music and I sing for them. And that's nice. I mean, they sing too, and we enjoy that. Religious conversion.
There was a question on schools, I think. Something to do with schools, if I remember right.
Students.
Sorry, did I miss that? Okay.
I think towards the end, maybe you would find it, because I saw it popping up as you were singing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll go through these, and if I don't find it, we'll circle back.
Sure.
Religious conversion. Somebody asks if there is religious conversion. Yeah. I think in a small way, because I think religions here have their own histories and are quite well organized, whether it's Buddhism, Islam, or increasingly there's a lot of Hindu groups as well, and Sri Lanka has a small Catholic community and also an Anglican community. So they're all organized, and I don't think conversion is one of the key problems here. Are there Sri Lankan Tamil marriages? Do you mean, are there Sinhalese and Tamil marriages? Hemalata ma'am, I think that's what she asks. Yes, there have been, but I think it's more common in Colombo among a particular class, maybe more upper middle class and the more affluent classes. It's more common. Less common within, lower middle and working classes. But there are inter-ethnic marriages, quite a few of them, but not enough to shake up the very rigid categories yet. So still people think in ethnic terms. Chitra ma'am is also, I think, fondly recalling Valare and the different...
Meera, the question about schools was, how are the government schools in Sri Lanka? And what are they doing differently during this COVID situation?
Sure. So the public education system here is quite strong, as I said, because of their history of universal and free public education. Except, I think Sri Lanka is now confronted with a lot of privatization, which means that government system is under-resourced and public investment in education has gone less and less over the years. And then one of their biggest problems in the school system that I have noticed is tuitions. It's rampant. From the lower classes, every child takes tuition classes for almost every subject, 5 subjects, 6 subjects, and there's a whole industry of tuitions here, which I think education is very, very worried about. And during COVID, yeah, they also had to do the online thing. And always, it's not the same for everybody. People living in rural areas did not have the same access to internet or gadgets. So it has not been smooth or easy or equal in that sense. But they try, they're trying to manage with the online system. Then somebody asks me about the different Tamil that is spoken. Oh, yes. So just like, even within Tamil Nadu, we hear very different Tamils depending on which part we are from, isn't it? So in Jaffna, Tamil is a very distinct tongue. And for me, what's very fascinating about Jaffna Tamil is that they use a lot of Sanskrit words. I think in Tamil Nadu, because of the Dravidian movement, a lot of Sanskrit words are not part of our lexicon today in terms of written Tamil. But here, Tamil newspapers would use words like Abhivriddhi for development, Abhilashai for aspirations, which I think we don't very readily use in Tamil Nadu. And of course, they have some very beautiful words for specific objects, like they would say Kadirai for chair, which I've heard only in Rameshwaram in Tamil Nadu. So the language is different. And I remember that after I spent a few years here, when I went back to Tamil Nadu, my colleagues in some Tamil Nadu newspapers and Tamil media, they said, "Madam, unga Tamil romba improve aichu Sri Lanka pona aprom." So there is a romance about the Tamil that is spoken here, and it's possible that I have somehow taken in some of those sounds. But I don't know. A lot of my friends in India say that my English has also changed after I came here. So I guess, but to every Sri Lankan, I will perhaps sound distinctly Indian. So I don't know how we imbibe language and make it part of our own. Do you interact with other foreign media correspondents? Well, there are there aren't anybody at this point. Actually, there's one more Indian who's working here, but he doesn't work anymore for an Indian publication. He's working for a local publication. But most of my friends here among journalists are working for local media, and they are extremely helpful, and I work with them a lot to navigate things here. I think school students, and then I have some kind comments from my teachers. Of course, teachers are like that. They say lovely things, and I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah. So if anyone else wants to ask a question, maybe a quick 1 or 2 questions.
Just one thing.
Yeah. Yes, Gita.
No, somebody has asked, is English the main medium of education? That's
Sri Lanka offers school education in all 3 languages. A lot of people study in Sinhalese, Tamil or English. But interestingly, those who study in Sinhala or Tamil medium also pick up very good English as second language. So it's quite amazing that they don't think that you have to study in English medium in order to learn English well. So a lot of my friends who are, now fully English speaking, were trained in Sinhala medium or Tamil medium. So in that, they have this advantage of knowing one of their own languages very well, in addition to knowing English. So they have all 3 mediums. And they have also a small international school system within Colombo, and much of Colombo's elite prefers to go there. Is it easy to be a vegetarian? Yes, if we like vegetables. I think for a fussy vegetarian, it might be a little difficult because we may not get only potato and that sort of thing. If we are willing to eat all greens, all vegetables, and enjoy different veggies, it's absolutely a delight being a vegetarian in Sri Lanka. There's one more question. Have you looked at their school history textbooks? Tamil Sinhalese conflicts has a horrendous past. Yes, I would really expect this question from Hemalata ma'am, who's taught history for so long. And there are only now questions emerging about how history is taught in schools here. So history textbooks don't do justice to the conflict or the war, and many lessons are one-sided. Many lessons are problematically constructed. So some teachers and educationists are trying to challenge that and see if they can, bring about some curriculum reform. Do Indian Tamils also get education? They are compelled to learn Sinhalese. Well, they're not really compelled to learn Sinhalese because they live in the central part of the island. Sinhala is the language that's spoken, and they think it's also an advantage to learn the language. So a lot of the Tamils living in the hill country are bilingual. They speak both languages, but their education outcomes are far less than any other community. Northeast Tamils and Sinhalese, the most backward educational accomplishments are from the Indian Tamil community. One, because they don't have very good access to schools, and those schools have vacancies. And because it's a hill country and the terrain is hard, children have to travel really far to get educated. So they are living in very challenging circumstances, and therefore their education outcomes are less compared to their counterparts elsewhere. Yeah.
Just a small thing, Meera, that Vallare is Brahmi. That's what I wanted to tell you.
Okay. Thank you.
So, anybody else wanting to say something? A word here or there? Okay, then I request Mr. Murthy. Yeah, yes, Mr. Murthy.
I would like to say a word here, Rama. May I?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think on all our behalf, on behalf of the teachers of Padma Seshadri, I would like to thank you, Meera. I'm so proud of you. Every time your article comes in newspaper, as I had sent you the message last week, that book on rape, I think that was very, very sad how women have been treated. Women are always a casualty wherever they go. It could be any war. It could be Syria. It could be Lebanon. It could be Afghanistan. It could be Sri Lanka. It could be Bangladesh. It doesn't matter, irrespective of that. And that was very, your review was very touching. Your detailed write-ups on Sri Lanka. And I feel that somewhere, I think all of us have done justice to our education system in Padma Seshadri. We have made our students independent, free to think for themselves, have their own perspectives. And that I think is very important, because in Sri Lanka, you can develop a perspective of your own, irrespective of the nationality that you have, because that I think is very important for a journalist, to be honest to the profession. And I think all of us in some way have contributed to that. And every one of us here is very proud. That's the reason you have a huge number of teachers. I think many of us are your fans also. And you write extremely well. Thank you very much.
Very beautifully summed up. Very beautifully summed up.
Thank you. That's really kind. And I also see Chandra Ramani ma'am now. And as I was telling some of you all yesterday, school for a lot of us is really the people in it. I mean, the institutional attachment is one thing, but I feel particularly attached to the memories that involves my teachers. And, it's really that this very parental connection that we have with our school teachers alone, not with our college teachers, not with our university teachers, because you've seen us through everything, our successes, failures, heartbreaks, bad haircuts, everything. So
I think Raja sir wants to say something.
No, I just want to ask everyone to mute himself. Hello.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I'm just muting everyone, and I am requesting Meera and Brigadier Murthy to unmute themselves.
Sure. And I think Mr. Murthy wanted to ask something.
Yeah, he will unmute himself. Please unmute yourself. No.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Before I do my duty of vote of thanks, I would like to ask one question to the Meera. This is regarding geopolitics. Being an army man, somehow I had the impression that we were taken for a ride in launching ourselves into an unplanned attack in Sri Lanka, and we suffered a bloody nose. And it was a big blunder from our perspective. Right in the beginning, we have been initially encouraging the LTT, we even armed them. Then somehow the Sri Lankan establishment manipulated us, and we had to launch a military operation without any notice, without any advance information, giving us a lot of casualties, which is nobody's interest, except we suffered. In the present circumstances, somehow I get a feeling, I may be wrong, you are on the ground, you know better. India is being manipulated by tiny Sri Lanka, especially playing one against another between us and the Chinese. How do we get out of this mess and establish our own sort of presence and in a nice way, without giving any more further chance for Chinese to take over, if I may use the word, take over Sri Lanka, because they slowly occupy and then make them indebted to their own country, and over a few years they will totally enslave Sri Lanka. Can you throw some light on this aspect?
I mean, being from the army, you would have a very long and rich experience in understanding how, military ties work between the countries. I'm no trained diplomat either, so I'm just sharing what my impressions are based on interactions with people. So this is not really an expert view. I'm just sharing my impression. So as you rightly said, Sri Lanka has been in different instances, playing India and China against each other. And the relationship with China, I mean, my personal view is that every country has freedom to choose its partners in foreign policy, absolutely. And China has been a very reliable partner in terms of economic support. I mean, the terms of that support is questionable, but whenever Sri Lanka has needed big bags of money, China has been there. But at the same time, Sri Lanka is also creating what many think is a very unhealthy reliance on China because of this reason. So just because China is giving money, how much is Sri Lanka going to accommodate China politically is a question that many people are asking. In terms of India, sorry, let me say one more thing about China. China's interaction is pretty straightforward. It's very commercial. It's very business-like. They give money, they take interest, they build projects. They are accused of corruption. That's about it. China does not say a word about anything political within Sri Lanka. So they have had a distinct advantage in that their image within Sri Lanka is never tainted by political issues. But on the other hand, India has a lot of baggage from the past. That burden is always there. And India has done, enormous development work in Sri Lanka compared to any other country. India has built over 50,000 houses for war-affected Tamils in the north and east. But really, what I think might change India's game in Sri Lanka is depends on how much India is able to connect with ordinary people within Sri Lanka, especially within the Sinhalese community, which is the main vote base for the governments here. So in that, India is seen as a country friendly to the Tamils. Oh, India does only projects supporting the Tamils. So slowly, India is also shifting and trying to work with Sinhalese in the southern parts of the country. And I think that is what will earn the trust of the people. And in particular, India helped launch an ambulance service all across Sri Lanka. We don't have it in India, mind you. In Sri Lanka, India has backed an ambulance project called 1099, and it's operating in every province, a few hundreds of them. And that has won India a lot of goodwill among ordinary poor people. So I think it's projects like that, rather than big ticket infrastructure, fancy projects. I think things that will touch the hearts of people, that will be of everyday use to them, add value, and maybe working closer in spheres like education, health, culture, and really building those bridges with people. I think governments have their political reasons any day. Whichever government is in power, they have their calculations, they have their priorities. But what can be sustained is this real trust and relationship that you build with people. So irrespective of who is in power, India will still be that trusted neighbor. So I think maybe shifting the image to one of that. And the other thing, I don't know whether you all might agree with this. There's another problem increasingly, especially after the rights of Kashmir was taken back in India, especially after Muslim communities started raising concern in India. Whenever India comes to Sri Lanka and says give Tamils more power, people are calling out that as being double standards or duplicity. I'm saying there is a section criticizing India for that. They are saying, look, you took back your own state's powers just now. Why are you coming to another country and asking us to give more power to the states? So these are, things that keep coming up like thorns in the relationship. And India would have to do better at home, and then maybe do better in connecting with ordinary people here. And maybe that's the way forward, to build that kind of trust and image as a real friend, as a real neighbor that cares, and giving the message that we are not here to intervene, but we are here to partner as equals. We are here to work with you. Maybe that sort of approach might, improve. And I think there is an acknowledgement of that in Delhi, in South Block, and we see some shifts, in policy in that way. I don't know if this fully answers your question, Mr. Murthy, but I tried.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So
the
can we
vaccine?
request
Just
Mr.
one
Murthy?
question.
Oh,
Doesn't the vaccine, giving the vaccine to Sri Lanka made a little difference?
Yes, in fact, Sri Lanka was able to launch the vaccine program only after India gifted 5 lakh doses of Covishield, but the
Yes.
second dose has been delayed because of our own challenge at home. So there are these gestures that are welcomed, but that doesn't really change the other bully big brother image much. There's always that India does a lot in terms of assistance, but that's never enough to completely change its image, because every time they comment on the Tamil question, it's not taken well by the majority community.
Thanks a lot. Lovely speaking to you.
Okay, so Murthy will also give the vote of thanks.
Yes. It's my pleasant duty to give the vote of thanks. Firstly, when I read the biodata of Meera Srinivasan, I thought she must be around 45 plus age group. Now, when I see her in person, I'm amazed that you look like a 25-year-old. So I don't know the real age. I don't want to know the real age. God bless you. It's been a wonderful interaction. I really admire your depth of knowledge and sincere application of your mind to various problems of the Sri Lankan local population, and how you put it across to the Indian media. It has come out very clearly from your interaction with us today that you are not a superficial person just to grab some headlines, publish something, but you have gone deep into the subject, and you are able to answer all different questions with a great depth of knowledge and clarity. So kudos to you. We thoroughly enjoyed this interaction. So please accept our thanks and sincere sort of appreciation for this evening. And we would like to have a separate session, if possible, on the cultural aspect, especially the Carnatic music. So I am sure your ex-teacher, Rama Madam, will organize this very soon.
She has promised us a session with Lubomudra, right? Meera?
Good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm
Meera.
sure that will be soon.
Meera,
Thank
it was
you, Meera.
Meera, thank you from me, Gita. It was really wonderful interaction.
Thank you very
And
much.
Thank you.
I have to convey some thanks to others also. Coming to the
Yes.
duo of Atashri, of Usha and Gita, because of their vast experience in travels abroad, the way they conducted the whole afternoon today with easy and continuous and coherent questions. It was a pleasure. We never felt any gaps in between. And they didn't obstruct the flow of communication between you and us. And sincere thanks to Usha and Gita. And of course, the teacher, Madam Rama, I really envy her. And being a school teacher is a wonderful profession, because even after their retirement, they always can interconnect with their students, especially from a school like Padma Seshadri. They have been doing wonderful work in all fields. And whenever they meet, that old boy or old girl network is very strong. And it's really a pleasure to be a when you, especially in your senior years, to interact with younger people who have achieved something in life is a great thing. And today Rama Narayan Swami has sort of organized this function, and our sincere thanks to her. Last but not least, I can't forget the Bhishma Pitamaha of our Atashri, Mr. Raja. He is the origin of these conversations, and he continues to do it. He is almost 90, and he is still passionate about organizing such events. We sincerely thank you, Raja, and that concludes my thank you.
Meera, you wanted to say something, so yes.
Yes, if I may just take a minute to say a big thank you to Rama ma'am for inviting me to this discussion.
Oh.
It's so lovely that, you all must be readers of different media for a long time and have very rich experiences from your own professions, and bringing all that together and being such willing, open listeners. It's just so lovely. And you remarked about the generational difference, and I think maybe this openness and this ability to listen and ask questions is also something that we must learn from that generation, because today in the age of social media, everybody is so quick to form opinions and put out very shrill and certain opinions, the certitude about everything. But it's so refreshing for me to meet all of you who are just so willing and eager and enthusiastic like children to hear about a place that's close by and perhaps a little like yours and a little different. So thank you, Rama ma'am, for inviting me to meet Atashri's community, which is lovely as I can see. And thank you also to Gita ma'am and Usha ma'am for the very thoughtful questions, very wide ranging, but also gave me an opportunity to reflect a little bit on my own work. It's not every day that I get a chance to think broadly about what I do. We are thinking of every day as it comes. So thank you for those very, very thoughtful questions that you brought to the discussion. And also thank you so much to all my teachers, Ambika ma'am, Chandra Ramni ma'am, Chitra ma'am. I saw Raji Babu ma'am briefly, and of course Rama ma'am. And they all are, when I see them smile, it's like, the proud parents that watch their children. And it's not that I have been in touch with them for very long either, but every time I see a little thumbs up from them on Facebook or something, it's special. It's just not like any other thing. And thank you so much for just continuing to cheer and encourage so many years. It's 2 decades since I passed out of school, so that might give you a hint of my age. So it's 21 years since I passed out of school, but just connecting with them all now is amazing. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the discussion.
Thank you, Meera. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Taking it up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Meera. We shall
and please
see
stay
you
safe,
again.
all of you. Take care.
Yeah, we'll see you again in our Fine Arts program. And
with Fine Arts Circle also, sir.
I have discovered that we can keep conversations going with Rama and all of you with such beautiful evenings like the one that we had today. I'm sure we'll have many more of such evenings in the weeks to come. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Meera.
Thank you. And
yes, ma'am.
Meera.
Yes,
உன்னோட குரல் நீ பேசுறதே மியூசிக்கலா இருக்கு. நீ பாடுனே அவசியம் உன் பேச்சே மியூசிக்கல்.
Thank you.
Very nice.
That's lovely. That's a lovely thing. Yes. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We'll be ending.
Right.
Yes.
Fine.
Thank you, Raman. Thank you, Atashri.
Goodbye.
Thank you,
Rama. Thank you, Rama.
Thank you.
Chandra,
Rama, thank you.
Chitra, Chandra, lovely to see you all.
Thank you.